So, Alan Rusbridger, so you are, what is your title exactly?
I'm editor of The Guardian.
The editor of The Guardian. And are you spend your time with the U.S. edition, you spending more time in New York these days? Or?
I'm coming every 6-8 weeks at the moment, yeah.
Right. And one of the questions that was asked was all the content creators out there and the citizen journalists, etc., and whether it dilutes quality journalism. And I know The Guardian is its mantle is quality journalism. And can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, how do you rise above it? How does the New York Times and The Guardian maintain its edge?
Well, it begins by having a room of extremely experienced journalists who are extremely good journalists. You know,
right.
We're not replacing this with that.
Right.
But the analogy I always use is one of the theatre critic. You know, we have a theatre critic in the front row of the stalls. There are 900 other people in the theatre.
Yes.
If you say, is it believable that the 900 other people in the theatre have got nothing to say about this play that is worthwhile? That's obviously rubbish. There will be people in the theatre who are extremely knowledgeable and have things to say. So the challenge then becomes to work out who are the ones that have something interesting to say. So that is the challenge for journalists. And there's no point in saying, we don't want to hear from you or go and talk over there. We want you here because you will add to what our theatre critic would say. And that may be partly a technological solution. It may be human beings reading stuff and making choices. It may be the readers making the choices about who's worth listening to and who's not worth listening to. But the one thing I'm sure about is that you want them where you are, you don't want them elsewhere.
I recently gave a talk at the University of North Carolina Journalism School at Chapel Hill, and the professor who invited me to speak there on communications and the changing role of communicators mentioned that 60 to 70% of the students at the journalism school are now going into PR and advertising. So is there a crisis in the study of journalism today? I know that Columbia Journalism School has a new head, and Emily Bell is up there, and you know. Is that?
There is obviously a crisis of funding. We're on one side of the riverbank and we have to make it across the other side of the riverbank because that's going to be a different economic model to a large extent. And so it's a tricky time to want to be a journalist because by and large news organizations aren't hiring.
Right.
So my advice to young journalists is to reinvent it yourself because you will understand certain things about the way the world works now that the old media organizations won't work, and some of them are in denial about it.
As a pure journalist, you probably have an aversion to native advertising and sponsored content, do you?
No, I don't have an aversion to it. I think you just have to be very clear about how it works and how you label it, and so that, you know, as long as the readers understand what is going on, which is which. Right. Then let's have it.
Last question. I had Emily Bell on a panel that I ran a couple of years ago on science reporting, and we had a disagreement. I said, you know, there's so many different sources out there, etc., but what has happened is the New York Times, for example, science section is no longer. And I felt that when you have very powerful news, journalistically, savvy, with a lot of integrity, news organizations that can set the agenda, it's good for democracy. But she disagreed. She says there's so many different voices now, and it's really. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I liked it when the Times set the agenda because you knew they were a quality news organization.
Well, it's interesting. I had this conversation. We employ 3 science correspondents. They've all got PhDs. They're clever guys. I said to them once, "Are there blogs out there that are worth reading that are as good as us?" And they said, well, "Come on, there are some really expert people out there." So again, it's like the theatre critic. Do you want those people? Do you want to have them on your site? Because then you will have infinitely richer and better content, or would you rather they set up in competition with you over there? And so we have a very good science blog in which we have something like 12 of these bloggers blogging. And we all win. They get a huge audience because The Guardian now has 40 million people on ComScore around the world. We share revenues with them, so they get the audience, we get the content, everyone is happy.
I think the point I was trying to make, though, and that's a good point. I mean, obviously there are some very talented writers out there and experts, I guess the point is that if the Pentagon Papers were to happen today, it would be a one-day story.
Well, when WikiLeaks was bigger than the Pentagon Papers, we did WikiLeaks, and it lasted for about
A week.
It lasted about 6 months actually.
Yeah,
because
right.
we released it, and so I think we did the phone hacking scandal.
Right.
That was a 4-year investigation.
But do you think everything is you think it's ephemeral? That's the point, I suppose.
The phone hacking we broke in July 2009.
Yep.
We're coming up to criminal charge. I mean, this is going to be a story that is 10 years
right.
in the making and the doing and the reporting and the consequences, and the Guardian will have been at the heart and reporting of all that.
And to your credit, you stuck with it.
We stuck with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't. Some people speak as though you've got to make very sort of bipolar choices in which you're going to have a bunch of bloggers for free and you're going to sack all the old journalists.
Right.
No, you don't have to. You things will change.
Right.
But if you can put the best of these worlds together,
yeah,
that's where the opportunity is.
Well, great. Alan Rusbridger, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.